If there's a single villain who embodies the emotional DNA of Batman the Animated Series, it's Mr. Freeze. Paul Dini's radical reinvention transformed a forgotten gimmick character into a tragic icon, an emblem of loss, longing and love preserved in ice. His debut episode, Heart of Ice, gave us a man stripped of warmth, clinging to love as his last tether to humanity. His second appearance, Deep Freeze, lifted him into something more mythic, half fairy tale, half gothic fable, letting him drift into legend. Then the movie Batman and Mr. Freeze Subzero refracted the tragedy again. Director Boyd Kirkland and writer Randy Rogel softened the bleakness, choosing compassion over despair. Their Freeze wasn't beyond redemption. He was a wounded husband who still believed love could thaw even in the coldest fate. It didn't contradict what came before, it simply looked at the same man through a gentler, more human lens. And then the new Batman adventures shattered that lens entirely. The episode Cold Comfort stripped him down, both literally and thematically, into a severed head fueled by bitterness. It was the creative team's attempt to take control back, to insist on a harsher reading. Some heartbreaks don't heal, some souls freeze solid. And the fan reaction was icy. And some of the criticism was valid. The tragedy of Mr. Freeze made him a deeply sympathetic character, and fans were emotionally invested in his story. To see such a sudden and bleak pivot was understandably jarring for some. So when Batman Beyond arrived, set decades in the future, writers Alan Burnett and Hilary faced a rare opportunity. They could give Freeze a final, definitive chapter, one that honoured every version of him, the tragic figure with a broken heart, the redeemed man reaching for hope, the embittered survivor, and the folkloric myth drifting beyond humanity. Their episode, Meltdown, takes Mr. Freeze and asks, when you melt a man down to his core, what remains? In terms of plot, the episode opens with the villainous Derek Powers, frustrated with his struggle to hide his radioactive condition. His doctors had created a synthetic skin to encase him in, but he was quickly burning through it. One of his more ambitious employees, Dr. Stephanie Lake, proposes a radical solution, taking a DNA sample, editing out the mutation, cloning him a new body, and transferring his mind over to it. But it's a risky process. They have the means to do it, but it's something that hasn't been mastered yet. What they need is a test subject, someone else with a similar condition that they can try it out on. And once they've confirmed that it works, they can restore Powers' humanity. Enter Mr. Freeze, at this point a bitter head in a jar that has been stuck in the Wayne Powers basement for God knows how long. He's completely in the thralls of depression, telling Dr. Lake that he spends every waking moment thinking about his own death. Dr. Lake appeals to his ego though, saying a brilliant mind like his deserves a body, and they have the means to do it. Powers presents it as an altruistic move, a way to help a man who has served his sentence get a fresh start, and he states that he hopes this treatment will help millions more people. For the first time in decades, Freeze is overjoyed, and most importantly, he is repentant. It's at this point that I think it's worth bringing up some key information about the making of Batman Beyond. Both the new Batman Adventures and Superman the Animated Series were effectively cancelled to make room for this new Batman show that would star a teen Batman. The network's president, the late Jamie Kellner, personally delivered the news to Bruce Timm and co., telling them he wanted this new show to be more relatable for kids, and cited Buffy the Vampire Slayer as the benchmark he was aiming for, which is kind of odd, because Buffy wasn't a kid show, but okay. Rather than contradict their own continuity or start from scratch, the team proposed that it could be a futuristic show about a teenage successor to Bruce Wayne, and they were told to get started immediately. This didn't give them much time to create characters or write scripts, and so an obvious solution seemed to be to revisit as many established Batman villains as they could. However, producer Alan Burnett told the writers to resist that urge and instead take the opportunity to come up with new characters. It would be too obvious to check in on those villains, many of whom would be elderly by this point and not all that threatening. I don't think Burnett necessarily wanted to set a precedent of the show being an intergenerational conflict either, but no one has directly said that to me. Having said that, there were some exceptions that would make sense, and Mr. Freeze was one of them on account that he was immortal. Given that his divisive new characterization was cut short when the new Batman Adventures ended after one season, this would also give the writers the opportunity to revisit the idea and flesh it out some more. In his Modern Masters book, Bruce Timm recounted how he was very nervous about bringing Freeze back, especially considering that he wasn't really involved in the script, and the last time that happened we got Subzero, which he viewed as a mistake. Understandably, he was adamant that Mr. Freeze should not become just another stock villain, but he really didn't have anything to worry about. Hilary Bader, who wrote Cold Comfort under the direction of Timm and Dini, came up with the overall story and co-wrote the script with Burnett to make sure that it stayed true to the character. At the same time, this episode restored the emotional complexity that had been lost in Cold Comfort, which was no mean feat. And I think it's worth highlighting that this was their first real opportunity to end a villain's journey, and to do so on their own terms. For Freeze, Batman Beyond was the perfect setting, a future where Freeze might have found peace, but was inevitably dragged down by circumstance. For as much as the world has changed by this point in time, Mr. Freeze's pain was still there, frozen in place, but he genuinely seems repentant once he had his humanity restored. However, not everyone believes in the power of redemption. The elder Batman, for instance, believes that people don't change so easily, and that Freeze's decades as a monster will be hard to overcome. Terry, meanwhile, is rooting for him. He wants to believe that people can change and that no one is inherently bad. After all, he had been a wayward kid committing petty crimes and getting into fights. Just look at how he turned his life around. And really, that's the root of what Freeze represents to Terry. That no one is doomed, anyone can be saved if they really want to be. It's just as much about how he views himself as it is how he perceives Freeze. And given what we know about the difference of opinion between the creative team and how to handle Mr. Freeze over the years, I can't help but hear Bruce Timm's voice coming out of the elder Batman, while a more hopeful Boyd Kirkland, or maybe Randy Rogel, from Terry. That hopeful sentiment is echoed by Freeze. When he and Dr. Lake visit his own grave, the final resting place of his diseased skull as he puts it, he believes that this is a new start for himself and possibly Dr. Lake. It's at this point that he is attacked by a masked man. Batman, who had been monitoring, intervenes and goes to take the man in. However, Freeze learned that his attacker was acting out of despair. Freeze had killed his loved ones years ago, and he couldn't stand the thought of seeing Freeze get a second chance when he had taken so much. I can't help but see this as an echo of Freeze's own attempt on Ferris Boyle from Heart of Ice. Instead of condemning the attacker though, Freeze frees him and apologises for the damage he caused. He can't erase the past, but he vows to spend whatever time he has left trying to be better. It's a moment that almost feels lifted from Subzero, a glimpse of the man he might have been all along. That renewed compassion leads to an unexpected revelation. During the decades Freeze spent locked away, his assets sat in a trust, gradually accumulating interest until they had grown into 500 million credits. And unlike the cold, predatory elites who shaped his life, see Ferris Boyle and Derek Powers, Freeze sees wealth as a responsibility. With that money, he establishes the Nora Freeze Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting the very people harmed by Mr. Freeze. It's the most sincere attempt he's ever made at redemption, using the legacy of his tragedy to lift others out of theirs. So far, everything seems almost too good to be true, and in a Mr. Freeze story, that's usually a warning sign. There's a striking moment after one of Freeze's public appearances. As he walks home, he begins to feel uncomfortably warm. He sits down on a bench trying to steady himself, and that's when the snow begins to fall. And this contrast is gorgeous. The world around him is freezing over just as his own body betrays him, heat blooming beneath his skin like a fever, and in that moment Freeze understands that his new life is slipping away. He's relapsing, and the cold that once sustained him is returning to claim him again. As you might expect, Freeze turns to Dr. Lake for help. She calls Powers, who is frustrated to hear that the experiment was a failure. Not out of any feelings about Freeze, but more that his own cure had gone back to the drawing board. He tells Dr. Lake that it would be wonderful if they could biopsy his organs and see exactly what went wrong, as if he were just a lab specimen. And actually saying that out loud, that's exactly what he is to them. He's not a person, an individual with thoughts, feelings, hopes and dreams. He's an asset. From Powers' perspective, he funded the cure, so he believes he owns the man who emerged from it. You'd hope Dr. Lake might object, given the connection she and Freeze had begun to form, but she proves every bit as cold as her employer, perhaps even colder. When Freeze starts to relapse, Lake doesn't warn him or comfort him, or even treat him. She seals him inside his observation chamber and cranks up the temperature, burning him alive for the sake of research notes and a clean report to Powers. Fortunately, Freeze escapes, barely, and heads off into the blizzard outside. The snowstorm swallows him as he flees, and their betrayal cuts as deep as any winter wind. The cruelty of Powers and Lake mirrors the harshness of Ferris Boyle, and it sparks the same icy fury. By the next day, Freeze returns to the Wayne Powers facility encased in a containment suit pulled from storage. And let's just take a moment to appreciate the design of this suit. It draws from the mainline comic book design by Kelly Jones, a stark, spectral look that really underscores Freeze's role as a vengeful spirit. For all his talk of being dead to emotion, Freeze feels everything. You can see it in the way he dishes out revenge. Powers is dispatched quickly. Parasites like him always betray and always exploit, it's in their nature. But Dr. Lake is saved for last. He corners her slowly, methodically, and with the same terrible calm she once used on him, he repeats her clinical reassurance. There might be some momentary discomfort. A cold understatement that perfectly mirrors her own cruelty, as her screams can be heard from the outside. From here, Freeze plans to blow up the entire facility that spawned him, with no care for any of the innocent people that may get caught in the blast. Batman appeals to him, saying that his plan will only cause more pain and suffering for everyone. But to Freeze, this is an ending. When he destroys the facility, he will destroy himself along with it. He has chosen to kill himself because he no longer belongs to the world. Victor Freeze is dead and buried, and he has no desire to live on as Mr. Freeze. Even when attacking Batman, Freeze doesn't want to kill him outright, instead he freezes him to the wall. Now granted, if Batman wasn't able to escape, then he too would be killed in the blast. But that's more of a chance than he gave to Powers and Dr. Lake. It's fitting then that Freeze's return to vengeance forces Derek Powers to shed his own mask. Throughout Batman Beyond, Powers' monstrous alter ego was something he'd kept hidden, a radioactive body eating itself alive from the inside out, contained only by cosmetics and boardroom bravado. But when Freeze storms the Wayne Powers facility and freezes Powers, that fragile facade finally burns away. Blight erupts into view, a living inferno of greed and corruption, the ultimate product of a system that chews up people like Victor Freeze and spits them out colder than ever. When Blight strikes Freeze, the symbolism couldn't be clearer. Powers' radioactive touch, capitalism's corrosive hunger made literal, sears into Freeze's containment suit, melting through the last physical barrier protecting him. It's the clash of two opposing catastrophes, one man ruined by love, the other consumed by profit. One frozen in trauma, the other burning with entitlement. Their collision is inevitable, tragic, and actually quite poetic. For all the ice imagery surrounding Mr. Freeze, it's radioactive fire that stops him, and Batman is caught in the middle. He could have walked away at this point, leaving Freeze to face Blight alone. Instead, Batman steps in, drawing the radioactive monster's fury. It's that brief distraction that gives Freeze his last chance, a final, desperate blast from his cold beam that sends Blight flying. What follows is one of the most affecting endings in the entire DCAU. Meltdown folds every previous incarnation of Mr. Freeze together. Heart of Ice's grief, Deep Freeze's mythic melancholy, Subzero's faith in redemption, and Cold Comfort's fatalism, and lets them sit side by side rather than compete. Love once made him human, loss made him dangerous, and betrayal finally breaks him. He knows what's coming, the relapse, the decay, the inevitable return to being nothing but a rotting head in a jar. Rather than relive the cycle, he simply drops to his knees and waits for the explosion to take him. Batman reaches for him, offering escape, one last sliver of hope. And Freeze delivers 8 simple yet devastating words. Believe me, you're the only one who cares. Even now, even as he chooses death, Freeze's actions are shaped by sorrow, not malice. The tragedy isn't just that he dies, it's that he came so close to reclaiming his humanity, only to have it torn from him by the very people who promised to save him. In the end, Meltdown closes the loop. Victor Freeze, the man, was redeemable. Mr. Freeze, the myth, was never meant to last. At the episode's conclusion, Terry mournfully admits that Bruce was right about him all along, and Bruce simply replies, "We both were." It's a really powerful line, but one that carries more weight as a piece of meta commentary. If you've been following along with my videos about Mr. Freeze episodes, then it's hard not to see this as a nod to the two creative visions that shaped this character across the decade. The mournful romanticism of Boyd Kirkland and Randy Rogel, and the harsher, bleaker realism of Bruce Timm and Paul Dini. Both interpretations were true. Both lived inside of Victor Freeze, and Meltdown is the moment they finally reconcile, just long enough to let him go. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members' end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. Next time. When I return on Friday, I want to mark the new year by talking about the two-part debut of Batman Beyond and how the creative team achieved the impossible, creating a replacement for Batman that the fandom has widely accepted. And then next Monday, I'm going to conclude my look at the villains seen in Beware the Batman by talking about Tobias Whale and how he continues Batman's long-standing habit of borrowing villains from other heroes' rogues galleries. Hope to see you then.